They are all that remains of an ancient supercity. A civilization that rose from nothing to dominate a continent and then vanished. These pyramids hold the secrets of a spectacular rise and fall. Secrets that paint vivid pictures of a lost paradise, a dark history, and ultimately, a chilling fate. Why would an entire civilization abandon everything it had built? After centuries of silence, the pyramids of Teotihuacan finally tell their story. In 1500 AD, Mexico was ruled by the Aztecs. Theirs was a ruthless empire where humans were hunted, flayed, and sacrificed. But among the Aztecs, rumors spread about a legendary lost city, a peaceful paradise built by the gods. Then, one day, the myth became reality. The Aztecs came across a vision from a previous time, a fantastic city, a city of pyramids. The ruined city was so enormous that the Aztecs believed it must be the most sacred place in the universe. They named it Teotihuacan, the place of the gods. The city had been built to inspire awe. It was a perfect grid of long avenues and massive pyramids. Its stone buildings covered 20 square kilometers, an area larger than Imperial Rome. The Aztecs called the central boulevard the Street of the Dead. And they named the two largest pyramids after celestial bodies, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. From its rise around 1 AD until its fall nearly 7 centuries later, Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. The Aztecs had no idea who had built the city or why it had been abandoned, and to this day it remains a baffling enigma. Something terrible must have happened here to turn a once thriving metropolis into a ghost town. All the great pyramid builders of the ancient world eventually faded away. In Africa, Asia, Europe, and in the Americas. We know why most of the world's pyramids were built. They were burial tombs for royalty, or altars for ritual and prayer. But Teotihuacan is a mystery. The secret purpose of these pyramids has been lost to time, because these pyramid builders left almost nothing behind. We don't know what they called themselves, what language they spoke, or where their rulers are buried. They left no evidence of a writing system, and so no written history of their past. But for nearly a century, archaeologists have been gathering clues about them. More than 900,000 pottery shards alone have been analyzed, numbered, bagged, and boxed. The meaning of many of these artifacts is open to debate. But recent excavations have revealed some details about the life and death of the city of pyramids. Teotihuacan is an isolated place in the northern reaches of Mesoamerica. At the beginning of the first millennium AD, it was nothing more than a dusty village, inhabited by more cacti than people. But suddenly, almost overnight, the population here exploded to tens of thousands. How did this dusty backwater suddenly become the largest city in the Americas? One theory is that the people who arrived here were fleeing from the fire of the gods. A mountain nearby suddenly exploded in a horrific volcanic eruption. Lava poured down its sides. Entire towns were buried. Rivers were dammed, and farmland was destroyed. To the people living in this region, it must have seemed they were facing an apocalypse, the wrath of angry gods. In search of safety, the surviving villagers fled to what would soon become Teotihuacan. But why did they escape to this place? There were other sites further away from the volcano, with better soil and more rainfall.
This is one of the puzzles really for us. There are other things people could have done if they were fleeing a volcano, for example. They could have dispersed into the other valley systems in the area. They could have moved further north and lived in a much more dispersed kind of settlement system as well, but they didn't. And for generations, they worked quite hard, it seems, to really keep themselves quite focused on one piece of land.
The refugees must have been drawn to this location by something, or maybe someone. Perhaps one person took charge during this terrifying time and came up with a plan for the survivors.
There might have been a charismatic leader who organized this refugee population into creating a new order, a new harmony with the universe and the cosmos.
Somebody with an unusually strong connection to sacred forces, who was favored by gods, and also as an individual with a plan of action.
The new leader's plan was to make a gigantic offering to the gods. Out of volcanic rock, the very substance that had killed their families and destroyed their towns, the survivors would build man-made volcanoes, pyramids. The aim was simple: manual labor in exchange for safety. The cosmic scale of this plan may have helped assure the refugees it would succeed. And so they began to build. And before long, a city and a new way of life were born. The pyramids ushered in a new age, a time of order and hope.
They're built at a time of great optimism, of great utopian vision for the future.
The city was one of the most important cities of the entire Mesoamerican region. 重要な
It became a place for pilgrimage.
国家行事を
The city was a holy city.
特に人が
The city would never again be threatened by volcanoes. The giant pyramids that remain today are only grey relics of the glory that was once Teotihuacan. Originally, every wall of every building was covered in smooth white stucco and then painted. The city glowed red.
Pilgrims came from far and wide to this glorious, magnificent place. Like Vegas, like the Taj Mahal, like the Eiffel Tower, was built to impress people.
This was the first superpower of the Americas, a wonder of the ancient world, born of disaster and created by a band of refugees. For centuries, their achievement drew people who came in their hordes to live in the shadow of the pyramids, until another mysterious disaster destroyed the dream. The secret of how this happened lies within the pyramids themselves. At its height, during the 4th century AD, there was no place on earth like Teotihuacan. The Egyptian empire had long since collapsed. Classic Greek civilization had faded away, and Rome had been destroyed by the barbarians. Europe was collapsing into the Dark Ages. But Teotihuacan was just reaching its full glory.
Some of the most important things happening on the planet were happening right here in Teotihuacan.
With its population now at 200,000, the city of Teotihuacan had no rival in Mesoamerica. It controlled trading routes from present-day Arizona to El Salvador.
It's just huge, the equivalent of anything in the old world. Its power extended throughout Mesoamerica. We have indications that people knew Teotihuacan from well to the north to at least to Honduras in the south, and out to both oceans.
This ancient megacity was in many ways comparable to large modern cities with which we're familiar, like Hong Kong, London, and New York. These cities are powerful centers of culture and commerce. Immigrants flock to live in the shadow of their skyscrapers. And in its day, Teotihuacan was no different. People from all over Mesoamerica came to live in the city of pyramids. Like the skyscrapers of the modern age, the pyramids spoke of power, status, and dominance. But building big takes more than ambition. It requires knowledge. This ancient civilization had no understanding of metal tools. They didn't use draft animals, and they were unfamiliar with the wheel. So how did they manage to build these monstrous pyramids? It seems an impossible feat. This puzzle has inspired many theories about who built the city. Egyptians, the lost tribes of Israel, Phoenicians, and even extraterrestrials have all been proposed as the builders of the pyramids, and all have been rejected.
These pyramids, these structures developed right here by the ancestors of the people who live here right now.
The Teotihuacanos didn't need Egyptian stonemasons to teach them how to build pyramids. They invented their own methods of engineering and architecture and were able to organize staggering amounts of labor. The Pyramid of the Sun alone weighs more than 3.5 million tons. Workers quarried into the earth until the landscape was littered with caves. Then they cleared 13 square kilometers of topsoil for the dirt interior of the pyramids. And finally, they hauled the stone by hand, several kilometers from the quarry, to the pyramid sites. Analysis of teeth and bones exhumed from ancient graves early in the city's history reveals that these workers were relatively healthy.
These people are not building the pyramid because they're being forced to with whips. They're building it because it's their responsibility to the state as citizens of the state. And in that sense, it becomes their pyramid. It's their construction.
The workers weren't slaves, but someone must still have ruled over them. So who was it? A king? An emperor? Or perhaps a governing council? No one knows for sure, because not a single clue has ever been unearthed that reveals the name of a Teotihuacan leader. We don't know who they were, where they lived, or where they were buried.
Never in the history of archaeology in the city have we found anything that looks like a ruler.
Flaunting individual power does not seem to have been a Teotihuacan thing.
Almost every other civilization in history has publicly honored its rulers. The pyramids of Egypt are monuments to dead pharaohs. The reigns of Maya kings are spelt out in glyphs carved in stone. The emperors of Rome were glorified as living deities. And giant marble monuments honor American presidents. But many people believe that the answer to who ruled the city of pyramids lies buried within the pyramids themselves. One place likely to contain tombs of rulers is the second largest pyramid in the city, the Pyramid of the Moon. So archaeologist Saburo Sugiyama is on a mission, digging deep into the pyramid in search of these tombs. The work is dangerous, as the tunnel could collapse at any moment, so they move slowly, carefully reinforcing the walls as they go. But when he reaches the end of the tunnel, Sugiyama makes an unexpected discovery. A wall, not of a tomb, but of another pyramid. The pyramid we see today hides an older pyramid. Sugiyama continues to dig deeper. And soon he's unearthed another pyramid, and another, and another.
We found 7, a total of 7 buildings.
The Pyramid of the Moon turns out to be not one pyramid, but 7. But why would these people build pyramids on top of pyramids? Sugiyama believes that the pyramids were the ultimate symbol of wealth and might. So as Teotihuacan grew to dominate all of Mesoamerica, the rulers built bigger and bigger. If this is the case, the message of these giant structures is clear. This land is ours. We are the absolute power. We can build as big as the gods. Sugiyama still believes that someday he'll discover a royal tomb and reveal a ruler of Teotihuacan. But there's compelling evidence that the pyramids had another purpose, an ingenious innovation built into their very design. The pyramids held the secret to keeping the city alive. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun is a cave. From its mouth near the stairway, it runs 100 meters into the heart of the pyramid. To the people of Teotihuacan, caves were sacred. They were where the gods were born, where the dead passed into the underworld, and where religious cults would come to pray in secret. This cave may have been so holy that the Pyramid of the Sun was built as a giant vault to protect it. But there may have been a more complex relationship between pyramid and cave. The cave tunnel travels in an east-west direction, the same direction as the pyramid itself. Is this precise alignment a coincidence, or perhaps a clue to the pyramid's purpose? The front of the pyramid pointed like a giant arrow to a location on the horizon, and once a year, at this exact spot, a constellation called the Seven Sisters would appear. This astronomical event signaled the best time to plant crops. A good harvest meant prosperity, but a bad one could mean mass starvation. So the survival of the city rested on accurately using the stars to keep track of time. Perhaps the pyramids were built to do just that.
The Pyramid of the Sun was a huge alarm clock. The sky, which is after all the most dependable aspect of nature for us, far better than trying to figure out when the leaves are going to turn or when the first crocus is going to bloom.
But how did the builders manage to align the pyramids with the path of celestial bodies when they had rudimentary tools at best?
To actually accomplish it does not require bulldozers, computers, even slide rules, machinery, calculators, nothing like that. It's persistent observation over time.
The fate of the entire civilization may have rested on one person and a few sticks. Then it was a simple case of taking aim. The astronomer would line up two sticks with the setting sun or stars to create a straight line. This line would then become the central axis of the pyramid.
We don't realize what you can do with the naked eye, with the hands, with string, with ropes, with sticks.
This simple method allowed the builders to align the entire city with the paths of the sun and stars. Some scientists believe that this was the plan from the very beginning, to build a city connected to the cosmos. When the people of Teotihuacan looked up at the stars, moon, and sun, they believed they were gazing at the gods themselves. Perhaps their intention was to build a city that was in perfect sync with the daily paths of the deities. If this was the case, good fortune should have befallen the land, and for centuries, it did. What began as astronomical observation developed over time into an elaborate religion. In temples on top of the pyramids, the priests of Teotihuacan scattered seeds and water as they prayed for fertility and rain. In their city aligned with the stars, these peaceful rituals might seem to indicate a society striving for harmony. But if so, Teotihuacan was dramatically different to the other great empires of the Americas. The Aztecs and the Maya worshipped bloodthirsty gods, gods that demanded not seeds and water, but human blood. Could Teotihuacan have been so different? A 1,000 years later, many people would like to think so. On the spring equinox, people from all over the world flock to these pyramids to worship the rising sun. Many of them believe that the pyramids have supernatural healing powers. If Teotihuacan was built as a city of harmony and peace, there should be evidence not only in the pyramids, but in the homes of average citizens. Archaeologists Ian Robertson and Luis Barba are searching for the ancient houses of ordinary Teotihuacanos. But this is no easy task. Most of the city has not been excavated, and 5 modern towns have been built over what was once the ancient city. The towns are warrens of small streets, and all too often their quest hits a dead end. Many artifacts are probably now buried under roads, walls and buildings. Archaeological treasures long gone. But despite the obstacles, scientists have uncovered 2,000 stone buildings covering thousands of square meters of land. These are the homes of the pyramid builders. At a time when most people were living in thatched huts, the citizens of Teotihuacan lived in enormous, single-story stone apartment complexes. These apartments were not just for the rich, but for everyone. Teotihuacan is the only city in the ancient world that built permanent structures for ordinary people.
This looks like a kitchen of a lesser family compound. Maybe the dormitory of the family would have been here, and we don't know what happened here.
Evidence found in these apartment complexes supports the idea that the city glorified peace over war. Nearly every wall was once covered with murals. While only fragments now remain, they are still revealing.
It's a person dressed as a jaguar with a headdress with feathers, a very beautiful one. And he's kneeling and with a rattle in the hand and doing this type of thing. And you see that he will walk towards and go up a temple. This is a building that is very decorated with feathers and with mural paintings. The private rituals may have been like this.
There are images of conflict and death, but for the most part they're of natural subjects. Mountains, trees, flowers, water, and lush gardens full of strange creatures. Had the Teotihuacanos accomplished the impossible and created an earthly paradise? Or were the murals nothing more than fantasy? Deep inside the city of pyramids is evidence of a very different Teotihuacan. A Teotihuacan with a dark and bloody past, an empire that may have been just as violent as the Maya and Aztecs. Saburo Sugiyama has made a disturbing discovery deep within the Pyramid of the Moon.
Aquí vamos a cortar un poquito la pared.
He has found human bones scattered in disarray, emerging out of the dirt. And this appears to have been no normal burial. The bodies were decapitated, and their arms tied behind their backs. Something dark and violent took place here. The find certainly doesn't fit the image of a peaceful utopia. The bones are carefully boxed and taken back to the lab for analysis. Forensic anthropologist Michael Spence believes he can read in the bones the story of how these people died. In the cuts, abrasions, and size and shape of the bones are clues to their life histories. But these bones are in bad shape. Unlike the Egyptians, the Teotihuacanos did not mummify their corpses. The headless skeletons are little more than dust. But one of the complete skeletons does have a story to tell. Spence names it 6A.
We can say that 6A was a male. Okay, the ruggedness of the bones and various features of them tell us that.
Spence fits the shattered pieces of the skull together. The hole in the skull is evidence that 6A died violently.
They sacrificed him by tying him up and then hitting him at least twice.
To preserve the success of the City of Pyramids, this man's life would have been offered to the gods. "6A was not the only one to die this way. Dozens of other sacrificial victims have been found. It would seem that Teotihuacan was not a paradise of peace and harmony. There was a price to pay for its success, and the currency was human blood.
The gods in Mesoamerican mythology, they had to be nourished. And it was the fate of humans to have to keep the gods going.
With this discovery, We know now that Teotihuacan was not a peaceful city that we thought it was. It's now thought that there were many wars. The people to be sacrificed were obtained as prisoners of war. They were taken in battle.
The Teotihuacanos apparently appeased their gods with the blood of the vanquished. The red of the city now takes on an entirely new meaning. And apparently it worked. The city thrived for hundreds of years. But somehow, at the height of its power and influence, something went wrong. Eventually, the blood was not enough. The gods betrayed the city of pyramids, and everything it had become was lost forever. What was it that destroyed Teotihuacan? The metropolis thrived for more than 5 centuries. But at some point around the 6th century, it collapsed. The sacred center of the city was abandoned. This is a mystery that haunts those who have wandered among its empty ruins. The city had the wealth of an entire continent at its disposal. How could it have fallen so completely? It's as hard to imagine as if New York City were suddenly abandoned and left to decay, with only myths remaining of a once vibrant and bustling city. We're attempting to solve the mystery of the pyramid builders' disappearance with the aid of some tiny clues, teeth collected from ancient graves.
I've seen situations where theories about the collapse of ancient civilizations have been thrown out because the teeth did not support them.
Teeth are one of the best ways to gain insight into the health of an individual. Strong teeth mean good general health. But the teeth that were found here reveal that all was not well.
In the later years of the city's history, health was not as good.
And the cause of this decline in health was the popularity of the pyramids themselves. Eventually, too many people had come to live in their protective shadow. The city became a warren of crowded streets, riddled with disease and the stink of sewage. There was not enough food or water to go round. Lifespans were shortened.
There could be a variety of reasons for that. Failures in food supply could be one. Another one, a prime urban one, is contamination of water sources.
I believe that a very large city such as this, with a lot of debris and human excrements going to the drainage, and it was not a very hygienical city.
The pyramids were too successful. Tensions began to run high. Eventually, the city reached breaking point. This apartment complex now housed a standing army, a sure sign that the rulers felt the need to protect themselves from invasion, or perhaps from their own citizens. The divide between rich and poor widened. The city's main boulevard, the Street of the Dead, became forbidden territory for common people.
The Street of the Dead had become highly segregated, very much in the hands of elite Teotihuacanos.
And then there was a final catastrophe, one that blood sacrifice and the city's careful alignment to the stars could not prevent. Drought. The need for rain became desperate. Priests even began to kill infants, believing the tears of babies would bring rain.
Well, people may have asked during this cataclysm, what was it that caused the gods to abandon us? Why did they forsake us?
The thing that may have happened is that people said that the priests were not doing their job.
Scientists once believed that as the city collapsed internally, it was invaded and destroyed. But there is little evidence of a power in the region large enough to invade and defeat even a weakened city. Teotihuacan must have destroyed itself. It was born from a fear of volcanoes, and eventually the city would also die in fire. Almost 15 centuries later, evidence of this is still visible on the walls of the pyramids and temples.
You see the burn evidence over there?
The fires were so hot that they blackened the stone.
Literally, they killed the temples to say we conquered here. So no doubt about that, the temple was burned.
The fire may have occurred spontaneously one night during a sacred ritual or sacrifice, perhaps a plea for rain or food. But one theory suggests that the city's residents rose in revolt and burned the symbols of their former glory on purpose, symbols they now believed of all their misery, the pyramids. It's an almost unbelievable action, as extreme as Americans burning down the White House, or Catholics setting fire to the Vatican. But one tantalizing clue supports this theory. There is scant evidence of fire damage in the 2,000 apartment complexes. Angry as they were, it appears the citizens would not burn their own homes. But one other theory is even more intriguing. Scientists have found evidence of charred piles of wood in the ruins of the temples, the remnants of large bonfires. This was not the kind of blaze that would have been set in a riot. They were premeditated fires. The real culprits might in fact have been the very priests who tended to the pyramids.
The glory days of Teotihuacan were gone. The project was over. The system was no longer working. The seats of power, the seats of sacred power, the sacred landscape of the Street of the Dead had to be terminated in some way.
The priests set fire to the temples on top of the pyramids.
They smashed the sculptures of their gods.
They severed forever the sacred bond between the city and the cosmos. Like smoldering volcanoes, the temples burned, sending one final message to the gods. Teotihuacan was dead. Over time, people slowly abandoned the city.
Here was a culture that dominated all of the Americas for almost a millennium, and then it was gone. It dominated center stage for so long. It fell, it collapsed, it changed, but then it left its legacy for all of us to see.
But even in death, the city's influence continued to spread across the Americas and across time. This mysterious civilization, once thought to have been a paradise on Earth, might have been the original source for bloody rituals adopted by later empires. Teotihuacan's gods might have become the gods of the Aztecs. We now know that Teotihuacan was no utopia, but there was no other place like it on Earth. For the first time in the history of the Americas, people gathered together to live in a metropolis. In this place, they built one of the largest sacred sites in the entire ancient world. It was a glorious experiment that lasted for centuries. A city that strived for harmony and order.
This is what people are living for. This is what they're praying to the gods for. Yes, they had sacrifice. Yes, they had war. But it was not at the heart of their ideology.
We still don't know who ruled them, what language they spoke, or even what they called themselves. All that remains of Teotihuacan are millions of stones, colossal monuments to a city and a people lost in time.